My name is Scott Challoner, and you are listening to the Leaders Council podcast for the people who run the country and the people who keep the country running. As regular listeners of our programme will know very well, part of our mission here at the Leaders Council is to bring you a variety of distinct perspectives on leadership, and this often comes from those leaders out there that have gone out there, got up every morning and made this country work. And to this end, we're joined on the programme today by Sarah Palmer, the Chief Operating Officer at what was once known as the International Association of Bookkeepers, having recently undergone a rebrand to now become known as the Institute of Accountants and Bookkeepers. Sarah, a very warm welcome to yourself today, and by all means, thank you for joining us on the programme. It's a real pleasure having you with us.
Brilliant. I'm delighted to be here. So.
Yep, likewise, Sarah. It's fantastic having you with us as well. Now, the Institute of Accountants and Bookkeepers, formerly, as I just said there, the International Association of Bookkeepers, is essentially a sort of representative body, isn't it, for the bookkeeping industry? And I just wondered, just initially, just for those that might not be familiar with you, what sort of work is it that you sort of do day to day, and what was the sort of motivation behind the name change, if that makes sense?
So the Institute of Accountants and Bookkeepers, we still have the same abbreviation, so we're known as the IAB as well. We are a membership organisation for financial professionals. We have a UK membership base, and we also have an international membership base too. We provide anti-money laundering supervision for those offering professional services or financial services to the general public, and we are also an awarding body, so we offer regulated qualifications to the sector too. So what the organisation is coming up to its 50th year next year, so we've got lots and lots planned for that, so please keep tuned, and hopefully we shall be back on the programme discussing that further. But really what we felt was the membership base has changed over time, and we were actually attracting an awful lot more accountants, and the bookkeeping profession is becoming more professional. And we actually felt that the change in name reflected who we are and what we offer is more representative of what we do. So, and it's a step forward into our 50th year and hopefully another 50 years of success.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, your role is to represent your members, isn't it? And given the sort of the proliferation of accountants that are joining the IAB, I think it's only right that we discuss some of the things that are really concerning that corner of the industry at this point in time, particularly so around sort of financial regulation on the show today. Because if you ask sort of people from sort of different parts of the finance industry, they may often complain that the sector is over-regulated and therefore there are sort of an increased number of infringements, and obviously consumer credit would be a very good example of that, for instance. But as bookkeepers and accountants, you're actually in the unique position of being outside of most regulations, meaning your part of the industry needs more regulation, if anything, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's probably misunderstood in the general public is that the word accountant is not protected. So actually anybody can set up, and I think that's fundamentally wrong. Last time we met was at the Leaders Council at the round table, and Lord Plunkett was there, and he actually expressed surprise actually that the accounting profession is the only major profession that isn't audited, and I totally agree with that. I think it's been ignored by multiple governments or successive governments just because of that general misconception, I think, with the general public. I don't think it's understood that anybody can walk out tomorrow and set themselves up and call themselves an accountant, and I think that's quite detrimental to society.
It's quite shocking, isn't it, that I have had sort of no accountancy training whatsoever, and yet if I wanted to, I could literally set up an accountancy practice from my own house and then go and actually sort of work in the industry. And the risk of that, I suppose, as well, is that these people who sort of aren't as professionally trained, they can very easily go and offer lower rates and actually sort of undercut those accountants that, you know, are actually fully qualified.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think the size of the problem is recognised either. So there is between 35 and 40% of people offering financial services to the general public who are unsupervised in any way, shape or form. And by that, currently, really it's the anti-money laundering regulation that's driving people to become members of professional bodies like the IAB. And there's an awful lot of people operating outside of that. So while we're able to keep our members accountable, we ensure that they're qualified, so they're actually able to offer the services they say they do. They're insured. I mean, we also ask our members to be DBS checked as well. So we have quite a high degree of integrity with our membership base. But there's not. Well, what I would like to see in the industry is HMRC raising their enforcement profile, because while those people who are operating compliantly, and they obviously incur extra costs by doing so, there's a huge amount of people out there who are operating outside of the professional bodies, and that's really what needs to be addressed with the regulation of the industry.
Why do you think that it hasn't been addressed up to now? And you mentioned, of course, Lord Blunkett was surprised at the Leaders' Council roundtable on this very issue, that accountancy isn't protected, isn't audited. So, do you think a lack of awareness is largely to blame for this?
I think so. I think there's a lack of a voice both from inside the industry and probably from business owners too. And it's quite staggering, really, when you think there's approximately 5.5 million small businesses operating in the UK, and all of those businesses need some kind of financial support on some level, whether that's payroll, from VAT, from accounts, from CT, basically preparing tax accounts. So I also think it's quite ironic, actually, that the tax gap at the moment stands at about £30 billion. So I think it would actually be in the government's interest also if they were able to introduce that regulation at the minute as well. And I think what I'm really, really pleased about with the role that I have at the moment puts me in quite a unique situation where I can actually start driving some of these conversations.
When we sort of look at regulation at the moment, sort of by and large, do we think that it's sort of too reactive rather than proactive? Because it seems to be the case that problems arise and then regulation sort of comes in to address it, and it's almost kind of too late to actually sort of deal with the problem that's there. So how do we think we go about kind of changing that approach?
I think you're right. I think there's an awful lot of reactive regulation that's been put in place. I think what would be a really beneficial way to go forward is to involve business owners earlier on in issues, because they're actually quite linked to the grassroots and they understand what's going on in the community. And I think some of the leaders, as you have on these podcasts, people that in your world are really quite best placed to start being advisory to the government. And I really think the government needs to be listening to what's going on at grassroots.
Absolutely. So, because we've talked about, haven't we, that a lot of, sort of intentioned businesses are out there and they are being undercut by those that are, practicing unscrupulously within the industry. But I think we also need to consider as well that people who go to these sort of unregulated businesses and use their services, they're probably just as much at risk, aren't they?
Oh, totally. I think what's interesting, so not only am I the COO of the IAB, I also have my own practice. So I set up a bookkeeping and payroll practice back in 2009, and that's grown over time. But what I have to say constantly, and I would say on a weekly basis, we have people coming to us asking for help because of unscrupulous practice. They've been left high and dry by people that have offered services, and initially probably those decisions to use those people were probably because they were cheaper, and these people operating outside the regulations are cheaper because they haven't got the overheads that those that are offering professional services are. So that's quite an interesting dynamic that we have so many people coming to us, and I also hear it from our members that they're picking up or they're supporting business owners that that have fallen foul of these people too. And what's really interesting is that there's absolutely no recourse for these business owners as well. The Financial Ombudsman doesn't appear to be doing as a rigorous job as is probably required of them. And as I said, I really would like to see HMRC increasing their enforcement profile, probably moving away from their supervisory role and actually stepping into that space. Because the business owner actually needs further support. I think what's quite an interesting concept, though, is that for a period of time as well, between 2012 and 2017, I worked for an Australian company as well, Pure Bookkeeping. Now, during that period of time, Australia actually went through a regulatory period with their over there with their government. So in 2010, the Australian government introduced regulation to the financial industry over there, and it's night and day what's happened. So at least I was very close to all that being introduced, and I think there was some really valuable learning. So I do believe that HMRC in the UK have got other models to copy. But what also happened over in the Australian market was that business owners were slightly reluctant to take this on board initially to start with because of the additional cost to them. But over time, they've actually now totally understood what the benefit to them is. So that's a big, big success story, which I think we can model over here. Interesting how the Australian government dealt with the segregation really in the market between bookkeepers and accountants was they introduced two regulatory routes. So they've got the BAS agent, which is for delivering the day-to-day taxes, the VAT, PAYE, that kind of thing. And then they also had the tax practitioner, which then covered the accountant. So that has addressed the market really, really well. So, which again, because we have this segregation in the UK market too, between the bookkeepers and the accountants, which I know very, very well. So there's many solutions, I think, not necessarily easy, but there is definitely solutions to the problem.
Certainly, and there are models there to follow, as you mentioned there, and it's important that any kind of new regulation kind of needs to be tailored to the individual corners of the industry, the individual businesses, doesn't it? Because one size clearly is not going to fit all when it comes to accountants and bookkeepers. I mean, there has got to be some sort of flexibility there, hasn't there?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And as just as well, just going back to what you said about HMRC, I think this is obviously a good thing to touch on, because there is a perspective out there that it's kind of almost doing two things at once, isn't it? It's trying to partially regulate, but also partially enforce. And as a result of kind of taking on sort of both roles, it's doing neither rigorously enough, isn't it? So obviously, of course, do feel free to expand on what kind of regulations you do want to sort of see put in place. But obviously that is something to consider, isn't it? That maybe HMRC does need a little bit of help in enforcing this.
I think that's very true, and I think I'm very privileged to be in a position where I can actually. Currently, I'm in consultation with HMRC and the Treasury about how this could actually be approached. And what's really great to see is in the last few weeks we've had some of the other professional bodies as well throw their hat into the arena too. So I hope there's some momentum built there with further voices being added. So, I mean, just to be clear, there's 13 professional bodies representing the financial sector. So, and I really think they're the people that are best placed to supervise the population. I think there should be a mandatory membership requirement of people offering financial services to the general public to be a member of one of those bodies, because those bodies are all slightly different, and it gives individuals choice as to which body suits them the most. So we've all got a slightly different emphasis on the services that we offer or the benefits that we offer through membership. I think there's plenty of regulatory bodies within the field, for instance, OPBAS, and I think their scope of work could be expanded or repurposed. I think they really are the ones that should be regulating what goes on. I think we definitely need a national register in the same way that we have electricians and the building trade. They've been moved to this, but it's actually a national register, and I think people should be able to business owners need to be able to make sure that whoever they're employing or taking on board to support them are accountable, and they're actually fit to do the job. They're qualified, insured, etc. And I think HMRC should definitely move away from the supervisory space. They're not built for that either. Do you know what I mean? They're not. I don't believe their structure is able to really regulate that, at a grassroots level and supervise at a grassroots level. They really should be the enforcement for the rules, in my opinion.
So maybe something to consider from that perspective then for those that are making the rules? And just going back to sort of what you said about Australia as well, I mean, it took a little bit of time to implement those steps, but it did provide a good model to eventually follow. Do you think that the appetite is there across the industry, you know, for the changes that are needed? And do you think that if we were to go down that route in the UK and sort of replicate that kind of model, do you think we'd see something similar in the sense that this could take sort of quite a while to sort of really come into sort of full effect, as it were?
I do. The way they introduced this in Australia was that they had a 2-year almost amnesty, if you like, just to ask people to come forward. There was a huge amount of publicity and education really directed at the business owners as well, which I think we need to have. I think we need to go to some wider bodies that actually represent the business owners, just to educate and explain the purpose for what's going on. There's a lot to be, a lot to go on in that space.
It is, isn't it? It's going to be a work in progress. It isn't going to be a quick fix. There needs to be a lot of discussions with the industry. There needs to be a lot of discussion about sort of who is responsible for the enforcement and also for the advisory side at the grassroots level. So there is plenty to consider on that front. And say, for instance, we sort of map out sort of what we'd like to see progression-wise over the course of this sort of next 12 months. Given your role at the IAB in trying to sort of push for this regulation, what sort of progress in the next 12 months would you sort of ideally like to see?
I think I would very much like to continue the work that I'm doing with HMRC and the Treasury, and I think by doing that, we can link that back to actually what's happening in at a grassroots level. I think actually there's another issue that needs to be addressed too. While, we've spoken mainly about lobbying government for that change, I think there's actually a mindset issue within the industry itself that needs to be addressed. And I do feel that I'm uniquely positioned to do that. So, our mission at the IAB is to raise the bar of bookkeeping and financial literacy. And I think that's a twofold mission. There's as we've spoken about, the lobbying factor, but I think also there's a mindset change that needs to be made even within our members. I think there's very much a conception that there was a cottage industry, and I think all our members need to be moved out of that space, and they need to raise their own way of viewing themselves. They are business owners in their own right too, and they are offering professional services. So there needs to be an element where they are raised too. So I suppose the work that I do at the IB is twofold. So not only is it the lobbying, it's also trying to raise the mindset of those individuals too. And again, let me just find, I'm comparing this back to Australia, but I think it's a really, really good model. I mean, in the UK, some of our bookkeepers charge between 15 and £30 an hour, whereas the equivalent now in Australia, they charge £60 an hour plus. So there's a real uplift in the quality of the services that are provided and how people position themselves. Somebody who's earning £20 an hour has a different mindset to somebody who's earning £60 an hour. They start respecting themselves more. They start respecting what they do. Their whole professionalism increases. And I think that needs to be targeted as much as HMRC. So I think we all need to work together to raise the bar of financial literacy in the UK.
It's fascinating, isn't it, that there's some undervaluing of the industry, let's say, but it's almost kind of self-inflicted. I mean, usually when you're talking about sort of an industry status needing to be sort of heightened, like for instance the care industry, it's usually external factors that have led to it being sort of looked down upon, but it's almost kind of been, as I say, self-inflicted with the accountancy profession. I mean, it's like perhaps they sort of undervalue the work that they do, and maybe that is a barrier to sort of raising standards even higher. And again, I mean, when we sort of look at a comprehensive strategy to regulate the industry and sort of stop unscrupulous practices, I mean, that is something certainly that does need to be looked at.
Yes, I do think it does. And I have an absolute pet hate I've had members say to us that they've given away, well, they haven't charged business owners through the pandemic for certain services that they've provided, and that drives me insane, because in essence they're undervaluing what they're doing, and by giving services away for free, they're actually devaluing the industry as a whole. So I don't think that's right. But that's me.
Exactly right. And let's hope that we do see sort of the change that we need to see within the industry over the course of the next 12 months. And I do think it would be fantastic, actually, Sarah, to sort of readdress this and welcome you back onto the programme in future, just to see what kind of progress has been made over the course of a few months. And just for anybody as well who is interested in what we've discussed today and wants to look a little bit more into the IAB and the work that Sarah does, I think iab.org.uk is probably the best port of call, isn't it, Sarah?
Yes, that is. Yeah, and you'll find us on social media sites too. So please follow us there.
Yeah, fantastic. And of course, the recent rebrand as well. The International Association of Bookkeepers becomes the Institute of Accountants and Bookkeepers, just to reflect those industry changes. We are certainly in changing times. And if you are, the head of an accountancy practice, and you do have any comment to leave on some of the issues that we have discussed today, then you are able to do that via leaderscouncil.co.uk/contact-us to leave that comment. And if you want to even apply to be on the programme to talk about these issues yourself, or anything that may be affecting your business, if you are the head of your own organisation, then you can join us on the show via leaderscouncil.co.uk/apply. And it could be you that's joining us on the interview next time. For now, it's been a real pleasure, Sarah, welcoming you onto the show. And do, by all means, take care and stay safe with all that's still going on as well.
Thanks, Scott.
And to everybody tuning into the programme today, I do hope that you all thoroughly enjoyed the interview with the IAB's Chief Operating Officer, Sarah Palmer. And to everybody listening in, please do take care and goodbye.